All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep, like really deep, into the ideas of Wilhelm Windelband.
Wilhelm Windelband.
Yeah. Now, you might be thinking, who? And honestly, fair enough. Not exactly a household name, but
Mhm.
his thinking. Super important, especially in philosophy. He was born in 1848 and became a central figure in what's called
A big deal.
the Baden School of Neo-Kantianism. Kind of a mouthful, I know, but think of him like alongside Herman Cohen, the guy who founded
Yeah.
the Marburg School. They were both like seriously advocating for this anti-psychologistic way of understanding Kant.
Right, right. So basically, if you're listening and you're thinking, I want to get this, but I don't have like years to spend reading dusty old books,
Exactly.
this is for you. This deep dive into Windelband is like the shortcut to grasping this huge shift in how philosophers, thought about knowledge, values, history, the whole shebang.
Could not have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we're doing today. We're unpacking Windelband's core contributions, right?
Hmm.
Like, how did he define what philosophy even is?
Yeah.
What methods did he think it should use? And then his take on massive topics like norms, history, freedom,
Stuff.
the big stuff. And just so everyone knows, we're pulling all of this from like the ultimate Windelband source, the Stanford Encyclopedia of
Yeah,
Philosophy.
that's one.
All right, let's jump in. So how did Windelband even arrive at his, what is it, philosophy of values?
Well, you got to start with his teachers, right? He had some seriously influential ones, Kuno Fischer and Hermann Lotz.
Oh, those guys.
And Lotz especially, he made this distinction that just became like the bedrock for Windelband. He talked about psychological laws, like how thinking actually happens in our minds.
Yeah, yeah.
And then logical laws, how thinking should happen. Like there's a difference.
Oh, I see.
Right. He was also super into this idea that valid thoughts aren't just like mental events, They have this validity that goes beyond our subjective experience.
And that right there, that's the seed for Windelband's whole focus on the normative, like what ought to be.
Whoa, okay, so this ought versus is thing, pivotal stuff. But Windelband didn't just like start there, did he? He went through a phase where he was kind of into psychologism himself, right?
Yeah, you're right. Early on, he was arguing that logic, even though it gives us these norms, still needed like a psychological foundation.
Okay.
He thought justifying knowledge claims ultimately came down to our goals as knowers, which he saw as psychologically driven.
Hmm.
He wasn't saying knowledge is just psychological, but he saw psychology and logic as being on this, like, spectrum.
A spectrum, okay.
Then there's this paper he wrote in 1875 where he went even further. He started suggesting that logical norms weren't actually independent of the mind.
Really?
Yeah, and that they had their origins in social history, like the principle of contradiction. He thought it came from, like, social conflicts.
Wow, that's pretty radical, right? So on this early view, logical principles only existed when humans recognized them. No clear separation between our mental activity and objective logical laws.
Okay, so that's pretty different from the Windelband, like the Windelband we know.
It is.
So what happened? What changed?
Seems like diving deep into Kant's critique of pure reason and all the Kant scholarship happening at the time played a big role.
Thanks, Sam.
You had thinkers like Kuno Fischer, Hermann Cohen, Friedrich Paulsen, all wrestling with Kant.
Oh, I see. All those big brains.
Exactly, and their interpretations definitely rubbed off on Windelband. The first real sign of him moving away from psychologism, though, it came in this 1877 paper on Kant's Thing in Itself.
Ah, the thing in itself. Now we're talking. That's like the ultimate philosophical brain teaser.
Right. So in this essay, he's pushing back against this idea that was popular in the Back to Kant movement.
Okay.
The idea that knowledge is like a direct interaction. The object affects our mind, and then our mind provides these a priori structures. Windelband's argument, unlike Cohen's, which focused on the a priori concepts,
Yeah.
it really centered on this idea of the thing in itself and the very nature of truth.
All right, so break it down for me. What was Windelband's take on the thing in itself?
So he gave this really fascinating historical account of how Kant's thinking on it, like, evolved over time.
I love a good evolution story.
Right. He identified 4 distinct phases. Phase 1, going back to Kant's very first dissertation in 1770,
Oh.
Windelband saw the influence of Leibniz's distinction between noumena, things as they are in themselves, and phenomena, how they appear to us.
Right, the classic distinction.
Combined with Kant's own distinction between, our receptive senses and our active intellect.
Okay, got it.
Then in phase 2, Kant starts grappling with how the concepts of our understanding actually connect to objects. Windelband emphasized Kant's point that we can only have a priori knowledge of what we create ourselves.
Through our rational activity.
Exactly. And since we can't just, make the thing in itself.
We can't know it.
Right. We can't know it directly.
Okay, that makes sense. But if we can't know it, why even bother?
Exactly. And that's where Kant gets to in what Windelband called the third phase, the most radical one.
Ooh, radical Kant. I like it.
So the thing in itself, it basically becomes this almost like a theoretical fiction. Like, we don't need it. Windelband argued that by ditching the thing in itself and that hard line between phenomena and noumena, Kant could make a strong anti-psychologistic move.
Okay, I'm following. Keep going.
Because if there's no knowable external reality directly hitting our senses, then the whole idea of our senses just passively receiving information, it becomes less convincing.
Right, less convincing.
And that weakens the argument for saying our knowledge faculties are all about psychological processes. It also let Kant, in Windelband's view, move toward this immanent idea of truth.
Immanent truth. Okay, define that for me.
Sure. It's where truth isn't about matching up with some external reality, but it's about applying rules consistently in how we connect our ideas.
So truth is more about internal consistency than, mirroring the outside world.
Exactly. But then, according to Windelband, Kant ran into a little snag with his moral philosophy.
Oh, snag. What happened?
Well, the idea that the moral law is based on reason, not on what we experience through the senses, it seemed to need some kind of grounding.
Grounding in something beyond just, our perceptions.
Yeah, beyond just the phenomenal world. So in the fourth phase, Kant kind of brings back the thing in itself, but he tries to do it in a way that still fits with his anti-psychologism.
A delicate balancing act.
You'd say that. So Windelband saw this as, an unresolved tension in Kant's own philosophy, right?
Absolutely. Even Kant couldn't quite square this circle.
Yeah, and Windelband felt that all the debates within Neo-Kantianism about psychologism, they were reflecting these fundamental tensions in Kant.
Huh. That's interesting. So these different interpretations were kind of playing out the different sides of Kant.
Right. And he argued that the first wave of Neo-Kantians, people like Lange and Helmholtz, they basically slipped back into giving psychological processes a primary role in how we know things.
Back to square one.
Kind of, but Windelband was clearly more into Kant's third phase, the radical one.
Yeah.
And his whole philosophy of values, that was his attempt to really hone in on and develop those anti-psychologistic insights.
All right, so back to this immanent view of truth. How did he build on that?
He really hammered home this point that truth isn't about a mirror relationship between our minds and external objects.
No, a mirror. Okay.
Right. Because any comparison we make, it's always between our representations, not between a thing and a representation.
Okay.
They're what he called incommensurable, not the same kind of thing. And for Windelband, Kant's big insight was that truth lies in the rules we use to connect those representations.
In the rules, I see.
He even famously defined truth as the normality of thinking.
Normality of thinking.
Meaning thinking follows certain rules or norms. He even redefined what the object of knowledge is.
Oh, wow.
It's not some external thing, but a rule for organizing those representational elements.
A rule?
A rule that lets us have, universal agreement.
So it's about, how we create order in our mind.
Exactly, yeah.
And rules ties into his use of axioms and values.
Right. He used those terms almost interchangeably to talk about these fundamental rules or principles.
Okay.
And he used norms to describe how those values or axioms relate to our actual psychological experience and the whole cultural and historical world.
I'm seeing the connections here.
And what's cool is how Windelband saw this structural similarity in Kant's three big critiques.
The critique of pure reason, practical reason, and judgment.
Yeah, all through this lens of immanent truth. If truth is about following rules, then there's an epistemic truth, rules for knowledge.
Yeah.
Moral truth, rules for action, and aesthetic truth, rules for beauty.
Wow. So all these different realms have their own internal logic?
And he even said, famously, that understanding Kant means going beyond him.
Going beyond Kant. I like that.
Highlighting his goal of taking Kant's critical philosophy and updating it for his time.
Through this philosophy of values.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got his journey from early psychologistic ideas to this strong anti-psychologistic stance.
Heavily influenced by Kant.
Definitely. Leading to his philosophy of values, all about truth as following norms. Now, how did this whole framework shape how he defined like the method of philosophy itself.
So this is where Lotz's distinction, the factual and the normative, becomes super important. It's the basis for Windelband's approach.
Okay.
He used it to separate philosophy from the empirical sciences. In his essay, What is Philosophy?, he talks about two types of mental acts:
Lay it on me.
judgments, which link representations and expand our knowledge, and then intuitions, which assume we've already got an object in mind and express approval or disapproval.
Okay, so judgments are about what we know. Evaluations are about what we feel about it.
Sort of, but even though evaluations seem subjective, tied to feelings, Windelband argued that some evaluations have absolute validity.
Absolute validity.
And they carry this, normative demand. They ought to be accepted universally because they're based on an absolute value.
So even our feelings can point to something objective.
That's the idea. He proposed this system of absolute values and this idea of a normal consciousness, like a partial representation of this system within our everyday awareness. This normal consciousness is what lets us recognize those absolute values. So philosophy, for Windelband, becomes the science of necessary and universal values.
The science of values.
Or the science of normal consciousness. Normativity and validity are super connected for him. Absolute values give judgments their normative force, and judgments are valid if they create this demand for universal and necessary acceptance.
All right, so this makes philosophy different from, say, physics or biology.
Totally different. He saw it as a second-order discipline.
Second order.
Meaning it doesn't go out and collect data about the world.
It reflects on the data.
Exactly. It reflects on the methods and findings of the empirical sciences to uncover the values that make them valid.
Values that make the sciences valid. Interesting.
And he argued that this reflection, this process, it can't be done through empirical investigation itself. That's where the fact-norm distinction becomes, methodologically crucial.
Okay, I see. So he was pretty critical of using empirical methods directly in philosophy, right?
Right.
Wasn't there something about a debate on genetic versus critical methods?
Yes. In his 1883 essay, Critical or Genetic Method, he really lays out this distinction. He was warning against confusing the explanatory or genetic methods of science with the teleological or critical method of philosophy.
Okay, break that down a bit more.
Sure. He was specifically targeting fields like individual psychology and cultural history.
Which, on the surface seem relevant.
Right. They seem like they could answer philosophical questions about values. But he argued that their genetic method, which explains why certain values are accepted and how they developed, it can't tell us if those values are normatively valid.
So just because a value is popular doesn't mean it's philosophically sound.
Exactly. He had three main arguments against using the genetic method in philosophy.
Get me with them.
Number one, he said it can't answer normative questions because values are so different across people and cultures.
Right. What's good in one place might be bad in another.
Exactly. So just by observing the world, you won't find a universally held value. And two, even if you can explain why certain values are accepted, that doesn't mean they're universal and necessary.
Because empirical observation can only tell us so much.
Right. It can't establish that kind of fundamental validity. He even pointed out how absurd it would be to try and empirically justify the very principles that underlie empirical inquiry.
Yeah, that would be kind of circular, wouldn't it?
Totally. And his third point, he said the genetic method leads to relativism.
Uh-oh. Relativism. That's a slippery slope.
Right, because it treats all beliefs as just natural outcomes of psychology or culture.
So there's no standard for judgment.
It can't judge between valid and invalid beliefs,
Right.
ultimately implying that all beliefs are equally justified within their context.
Right. If you're just describing what people do believe, you can't really say what they should believe.
Exactly. So what was his alternative, this teleological or critical method?
Yeah, tell me about that. How do we actually do philosophy the right way, according to Windelband?
He described it as formal at its core. The basic axioms or values, he said, can't be proven the way we prove empirical claims.
Okay, so we're not doing science experiments here.
Right. Their validity comes from the fact that the goals of truth, beauty, and goodness, they can only be reached if we already accept these values.
So they're like preconditions, almost.
Exactly. That's the teleological part, the preconditions for reaching certain ends.
And the critical part.
It's about philosophy's role in examining and justifying these underlying assumptions.
So it's about self-reflection, like looking at the foundations of our own thinking.
Yeah, he called it Selbstbesinnung. It's where the empirical mind becomes aware of its own normal consciousness through these teleological considerations.
So philosophy helps us separate those contingent beliefs from the ones that have real value.
Precisely.
Okay, so philosophy is reflective, second order, using this critical teleological method to uncover the values that underpin knowledge, ethics, aesthetics.
You got it.
This sounds like it would impact how he viewed the relationship between different fields of study, right? Especially the natural sciences and the historical sciences, which were really booming in the 19th century.
Oh, absolutely. The rise of professional historical disciplines in the 19th century, that was a huge factor in Windelband's thinking. It made him reconsider Kant in light of these changes.
Makes sense. Things were changing rapidly back then.
And one of his most famous contributions was this distinction between the historical sciences, focusing on human history and culture, and the natural sciences.
A classic distinction.
Yeah, and his goal was to defend the independence of historical sciences against the idea that there's only one right scientific method.
Which was presumably the method of the natural sciences.
You got it.
He wasn't alone in thinking about this, though, right? Didn't Wilhelm Dilthey also try to define a separate space for the human sciences?
Oh, absolutely. Dilthey, in his Introduction to the Human Sciences, he based his distinction on the difference between outer experience for natural sciences and inner experience for human sciences, which he called sciences of spirit.
Sciences of spirit? That sounds very Dilthey.
Right. He argued that inner experience reveals the individual as part of this web of social and cultural relations.
Okay.
And he thought a kind of descriptive psychology could be the basis for these sciences of spirit.
Interesting. But Windelband wasn't on board with this, was he?
Not entirely. He didn't think historical sciences were based on a unique kind of experience.
Okay.
And he questioned relying on inner perception. He also put psychology with the natural sciences.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, and he rejected the whole sciences of spirit label because it suggested a fundamental difference in the objects being studied.
Like spirit versus nature.
Right, rather than a difference in methods.
But Windelband wanted a more formal methodological way to distinguish them.
Yes. He looked at scientific justification in its most abstract form, arguing that all knowledge is about the relationship between the general and the particular.
The general and the particular, that's a big one.
Right. And that scientific justification is either inductive or deductive. And he said the key difference between the sciences lies in their knowledge goals.
Knowledge goals, I like that.
He distinguished between nomothetic sciences, aiming to discover general laws and treating individual cases as examples.
So physics trying to find those universal laws.
Exactly. And then you have the idiographic sciences, which try to understand the unique individual object or event.
And history trying to understand specific events or individuals.
Exactly. It's about capturing that individual thing in all its detail.
Yeah.
And he emphasized that this distinction, it's formal, based on the goal, not the object.
Okay, so the same object could be studied by either method.
Right. He also pointed out that idiographic sciences often rely on knowledge from nomothetic sciences.
Like, you need some general understanding of physics to understand a specific historical event involving, say, a bridge collapsing.
Exactly. But, and this is key, Windelband also pointed to the role of values in the idiographic method.
Oh, values come back into play.
Yeah. He argued that choosing which historical facts are relevant, that depends on what we value.
I see.
Understanding how those facts fit together, that involves values. And we just inherently value the unique and individual in history and culture.
So our values shape how we understand the past.
Absolutely. And his student, Heinrich Rickert, he took these ideas and ran with them. He developed a whole theory of value relevance in the historical sciences of culture.
Value relevance, interesting.
Yeah, it's how they form concepts that can capture the unique aspects of historical realities.
So Windelband wasn't just about understanding the present. He was also thinking about how we understand the past, especially the history of philosophy itself.
Right. He made major contributions to the history of philosophy with what he called the history of problems method.
History of problems, not just a history of philosophers.
Exactly. Instead of just listing philosophers and their ideas chronologically, he organized his accounts around the big problems that shaped philosophical debates.
He was really building on Fisher's work here, wasn't he?
Definitely. But he took it to a whole new level.
So why this focus on problems instead of just the thinkers?
He wanted to combine two key ideas. One, that philosophy is always shaped by its historical context.
It's a product of its time.
Right. And two, that the history of philosophy has genuine systematic importance for philosophy itself.
You can see the Hegelian influence here, right?
Yeah. Recognizing that philosophy is, in a way, the self-consciousness of developing cultural life.
A very Hegelian phrase.
And appreciating Hegel's idea that the history of philosophy contributes to the unfolding of reason. Windelband even called history the organon of philosophy, a tool for revealing the absolute values that his critical method was trying to uncover.
That's a powerful image. But he wasn't a total Hegelian when it came to philosophical history, was he?
No, he had some criticisms. He agreed that philosophy is shaped by its time, but he had a different take on how...
Different from Hegel's idea of the dialectic.
Right. For Windelband, it meant that philosophical thinking is influenced by contingent historical factors, not just the unfolding of some grand rational plan.
A bit more messy and unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. He criticized Hegel's view that the sequence of philosophical ideas was necessary and had inherent systematic significance.
Okay, so not everything fits neatly into the grand narrative.
Right. Windelband argued that historical development is also influenced by, the forces of cultural history, which lead to what he called problem convolutions.
Problem convolutions. That sounds complicated.
It is. It's where different philosophical questions get all tangled up because of accidental historical circumstances.
So things get messy because of the complexities of history.
Exactly. He also emphasized the role of the individual philosopher's personality and character in shaping how problems and concepts are expressed.
So it's not just abstract ideas bouncing around, it's real people grappling with them.
Exactly. And what about the idea of progress in philosophy?
Yeah, was Windelband optimistic about that? Like, are we getting closer to the truth?
He was pretty skeptical, actually. He argued that historical change isn't inherently progress.
Non-inherently, okay.
To determine progress, you need a standard, a goal, an absolute value to measure against.
You need a yardstick.
Right. And he was cautious about equating the development of present-day values with progress.
Just because we believe something now doesn't make it better.
Right. He pointed out that history is shaped by chance, and we could be holding on to delusions that we think are true just because they're part of our historical context.
Delusions we've inherited from the past.
Yeah. He felt you can only talk about progress if you already have an absolute value to guide you.
Which means appealing to a progressive history of philosophy doesn't actually help us find those values.
Exactly. It's putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, so if philosophy is so influenced by its time, how do we even get to those timeless and eternal problems he talked about?
That's where his later work comes in, especially his Introduction to Philosophy from 1914.
Ah, a later Windelband.
He argued there that philosophical reflection usually starts when our everyday and scientific concepts break down.
When they stop working.
Yeah, when they lead to contradictions or just don't seem to make sense anymore.
Like hitting a wall in our understanding.
Exactly. And this forces us to question our most basic assumptions.
To go back to the drawing board.
Right. And in this process of rethinking and reorganizing our concepts, Windelband thought a kind of rational necessity kicks in.
Rational necessity.
It leads to philosophical problems that have an objective necessity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So these problems aren't just random. They arise from a deeper necessity.
Right. He saw them as coming from the inadequacy and contradictory imbalance of the concepts we inherit from common sense and science.
So the cracks in our everyday thinking reveal these deeper problems.
Yeah, and because they stem from fundamental tensions in our thinking and are driven by logic, he thought they tend to pop up throughout history.
Making them timeless and eternal, in a way.
Exactly. They're not tied to a specific time or place.
And how does studying the history of philosophy help us deal with these recurring problems?
Windelband thought examining the history of philosophy could help us separate the temporal causes from the timeless reasons behind these problems.
Unpacking the historical baggage, so to speak.
Exactly. By understanding how a problem developed, we can hopefully disentangle the cultural influences from the underlying logic and presuppositions.
So we can see what's truly essential to the problem.
Right. Ultimately, his aim was to help us distinguish between ideas that are just accepted because of historical circumstance and those that are valid in themselves.
So history becomes a tool for filtering out the noise and getting to the core of things.
Exactly. He called it the organon of critical philosophy because it's essential for revealing those absolute values.
Okay, we've covered a lot. His break from psychologism, his philosophy of values, his distinction between the sciences, his history of problems approach. But there's one more area. His views on philosophy and worldviews.
Yeah, this is where Windelband's thinking evolved over time, back in the 1880s during the whole materialism controversy.
Which was a big deal for the neo-Kantians.
Huge.
Well,
he was adamant that critical philosophy, with its focus on justification, what he called the quaestio juris,
the question of right, yeah.
it shouldn't try to provide a worldview, like a complete metaphysical picture of reality.
Okay, so philosophy has its limits.
He argued that questions of optimism or pessimism, for example, were beyond the scope of scientific philosophy.
Because they rely on speculation about the ultimate purpose of things.
Right. He saw those as unscientific projections. At that point, philosophy was mainly a second-order formal discipline for him.
Not about building grand systems.
Right. But then things changed.
They often do.
Right. After 1900, he started arguing that philosophy does aim to provide a scientifically grounded worldview.
A change of heart.
He saw the cultural landscape shifting and felt a need to emphasize the positive side of critical philosophy.
Not just the critical part, but what it can offer.
Exactly. This coincided with a renewed interest in Kant, specifically the critique of the power of judgment.
Ah, the third critique. A favorite of many.
Windelband and his student Rickert saw it as a bridge between the realm of natural laws from the first critique and the realm of values, which was central to Windelband's philosophy.
Okay, so how did the critique of the power of judgment bridge those two realms? What was the connection?
He started emphasizing the concept of realization. He interpreted the purpose of organization of nature, discussed in the third critique, as ultimately leading to the value-driven processes of human history and culture.
Nature leading to culture. Interesting.
Right, and this allowed him to see a unity connecting both natural and historical sciences. His language even became a bit more
A
Hegelian.
little bit of Hegel creeping back in.
Yeah, he talked about the spiritual value content of reality
Spiritual value content. Very Hegelian.
and the progressive realization of rational values throughout history, with humanity's task being the development of rationality.
So history has a purpose, in a way.
The realization of a shared humanity grounded in reason. In his later philosophy of culture and transcendental idealism, he tried to reveal the unity of culture through the self-awareness of reason producing its objects and the realm of validity.
So he moved from a strictly critical view to a more expansive vision of philosophy's role in understanding culture and our place in the world.
Yeah, and he was always striving to keep philosophy relevant to his time.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into Wilhelm Windelband. We've gone from his journey from Kant to his philosophy of values.
With that crucial distinction between facts and norms.
Right. His defense of philosophy's unique method, his distinction between the sciences, his history of problems approach, and even his evolving views on worldviews.
It's amazing how influential his ideas have been.
It really is. And for you, our listener, I hope this has given you a solid grasp of this important figure in the history of philosophy.
His work gives us valuable ways to think about what we know, how we judge value, and how we investigate the past.
Absolutely. And as a final thought for you to ponder, does Windelband's separation between facts and values still hold up today?
Good question.
Especially in a world where science constantly raises ethical questions, and our values shape the very questions we ask.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
Or, how might his history of problems approach help us understand current philosophical debates? If this deep dive has piqued your interest, I highly recommend exploring Neo-Kantianism or reading Windelband's works. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.